Welcome to Education for Your Better Health, and we have some very exciting things to share with you today. And I have a very special guest from Canada, and her name is Elaine Gottschall, and she has written a book that explains and helps us to understand about a lot of things that create a lot of health problems, that nutrition and proper eating habits have so much to do with our health and our well-being. And I was very excited when I heard about Elaine, and I felt that so many other people would want to hear about and be able to have a share in understanding all of the things that she's learned through the time that she spent in trying to find out how to help her daughter with her health. And that's a very interesting thing. When you're trying to help someone to get better, you look into, you research, you find out so many things, and then when you can share this with other people so that it can help them, that's exciting. And so that's what our show's all about this morning. So if you have any kind of a digestive problem, any kind of skin problem or anything like that, we're not here to diagnose, cure anything. We're here to help you understand how that you can have better health with some education to help you do that. And so I would like to introduce you now to Elaine Gottschall.
Thank you for having me, Wilma.
It's really nice to have you here. And I'd just like to show you the book that Elaine has written. It's called Breaking the Vicious Cycle, Intestinal Health Through Diet. And Elaine has so much to share with us. And we also have another guest today, and this is Linda Fanning. Fanning, okay. I was afraid I wouldn't get that right. And Linda is very special in our program today, too, because she has had the condition that we're going to be talking about, and she's used the program to help herself to have better health, and so we're really looking forward to hearing her experience also. But right now I'd like to have Elaine explain to us how she was able to help her daughter and all of the research that has gone into this. So I hope that you sit back and really maybe get a pencil and paper so that you can write down some of the things that she's going to talk about, because this is information that is just for a better lifestyle. And when we think about lifestyle, that is our whole pattern of the way we live, not just one aspect of it. So as we listen to Elaine talk, I think it will help you to become more aware of your own eating habits and how maybe you can make some improvements. So just get a sheet of paper and write at the top of it, goals for my better health. And at the end of the show, just see how much you've got from it, and then try to learn to live by that. So now I'd like to let Elaine explain how she got involved in all of this.
Well, about 40 years ago, when we were living in New York City and trying to raise our family, our younger child, at the age of 4 and a half, was diagnosed with something I had never heard about. She had awakened at night, 2 in the morning, went into the bathroom. We couldn't get her out until 8, and I don't like to appear indelicate, but when we went to flush the john, it was filled with blood. We rushed down to our family doctor in New Jersey, and from his office called my uncle, who was an eminent internist in Pittsburgh, and he gave me the names on the phone of some of the finest leading doctors in this area of gastroenterology in New York. After 2 visits to New York, to New York Cornell Medical Center, she was diagnosed as having an incurable disease called ulcerative colitis, and we were told that if we put her on the prednisone, it was called cortisone in those days, that would probably control the symptoms. But if it didn't, they would have to remove her colon and put a bag on her abdomen. And I would like to say that one is very happy that there are life-saving procedures, but to do this to a little child, of course, anyone would be traumatized by the idea. Well, the prednisone did work for a little while, and then the symptoms returned, and the second time around it no longer worked. And they were ready to operate. I rushed her down to Pittsburgh. My uncle put her on another drug, and for 3 years we struggled with this child. She wasn't growing. She was having seizures, night seizures. Interestingly enough, there have been statistics reported that people that have gastrointestinal problems have a 40% greater incidence of neurological problems like epilepsy, schizophrenia. But she was having these terrible seizures, and we were just having a terrible time with her. She couldn't go to school anymore. She was having accidents, not growing, and through the grace of God, we were led to a 92-year-old specialist right in the heart of New York City, who after the second visit sat me down and asked me that question that I had not been asked by the 15 other specialists. Mrs. Gottschall, what are you feeding this child? And when I told him I was trying to feed her a normal diet, but she was throwing it up, he said, we're going to change all that. And he made 3 basic changes to her diet. The first 2 were quite simple. He said she cannot have any fluid milk because people with these conditions have the condition aggravated if they get the milk sugar lactose. So you are to make your own yogurt. And I remember he didn't write things down, and my husband and I were really working hard to remember everything. He told us how to make the yogurt, and I thought, well, I can use that for milkshakes. I can make ice cream out of that, no problem. She can have cheese, he said, because the lactose in the good cheeses is all gone. So that was no problem. The second thing he told us was no problem. She cannot have table sugar. She cannot have corn syrup, but she can have honey. Well, we were used to using honey. I could sweeten things with that, but the third thing he told me was difficult. He said she can absolutely have no grains or potatoes or corn or rice. And I thought to myself, how can I bake for this child? How can I make her cookies? I want her to get better. I want her to have a normal life. So I called a friend of ours who made beautiful pastries. She was from Austria, and every time she had a party, she'd have nut torts. So I called her quickly, and she gave me the instructions. All I had to do was grind these nuts up in the blender, and I began baking muffins and cookies with them. We put this child on the diet. Within 10 days, the schizophrenic seizures that she had been having now for almost a year, 4 times a week, went never to return. My daughter is in her 40s, has 2 beautiful children. Knock on wood, but had a seizure back. Within 3 months, the intestinal symptoms went, and by the end of the year, we knew we were on our way. She was getting better. She had begun growing like a weed. The only thing that I left in New Jersey that I regretted leaving when we moved to Canada was the closet door where we were measuring her growth. Oh. Every week there seemed to be a ½ inch of growth. She was eating me out of house and home because she was making up for lost time. By the end of the year, we were out of the woods, and I began going to the medical library because the doctor was 92 years old when we found him. His name is down in the annals of history as being the first doctor to cure celiac, which is another intestinal disease. I wouldn't have bothered him. I had so many questions. Why was he the only doctor out of 15 that asked me what I was feeding my child? And the second question, how can food cure a disease which is considered incurable? So I started going to the medical library, and within a ½ hour, I found, with no problem at all, research papers that had been written in the 40s, 50s, and this was the 60s, which unequivocally stated when you have a person with an intestinal problem, diarrhea, severe constipation, you do not use lactose, which is in fluid milk. And I remember copying them down because the Xerox machines weren't around in those days, and coming home to my husband, and I was furious. I said, Herb, this work has been done, and nobody told us about it. And my husband is a very positive person. He said, Elaine, you've always wanted to go to college. Having graduated during the Depression in '39, I didn't have the opportunity. He said, you've always wanted to go to college. There's one 20 minutes away, Montclair State. He said, get in there and find out what in the blankety blank is going on. So I entered at the age of 47, and I spent 12 years on a treasure hunt. I was on a treasure hunt. I wanted to read the research, to study it, to do research, and to find out how food can cure a disease. And
you know, the interesting thing about what Elaine is talking about here, there was a beginning to this, but she had a goal in mind. When she started working with her daughter, I mean, when you think of how many people you know that their children may have some condition or something, and they don't know where to turn or what to do, but she set out to find out how to deal with this. And where there's a will, there's a way. That's what I was taught. And if you keep that principle in mind, you can, with determination, you can find out a lot of things. And we have a person here who's going to share so much with us that she has took all the energy, all the time to do all of this research, and she's willing to share that with us. And so we want to really be grateful that we can listen to all of the details of what she has to share with us. So this is really exciting. So don't go to sleep on us now. We're going to get right on here.
Well, I just want to say again that I did not develop this diet. This diet was developed by a master. And I will not change one word of what he told us. People have come up, oh, Elaine, sourdough bread is okay. No way will I change one word of that master. I went into that university to find out why. And I found so much information, Wilma. It is actually breaking out of the medical library walls. It is lying there, gathering dust. I spent 12 years there. You just don't go in to learn nutrition. You cannot learn the way food affects the body by taking nutrition courses. You've got to take immunology. You've got to take genetics. You've got to take years of biochemistry. This is a very, very integrated, sophisticated science. People go away for a weekend and take a course, a seminar, and come back and call themselves a nutritionist. And you have a dozen bottles on your counter, and you take this one and that one, and that's really not real nutrition. You've got to really understand the way the body is affected by various foods, especially the digestive tract. Because you can take every good food in the world and eat it, and that does not ensure you that that is nourishing you properly if you are not digesting it properly.
Right. There's a saying, you are what you eat, but I've learned that isn't the way it is. It's what you can assimilate.
Absolutely.
That makes the difference.
What you do not digest, you do not absorb, you do not assimilate.
Right.
And that is with the tricky part. What you do not digest and absorb goes down to the lower part of the gastrointestinal tract and overfeeds that unseen world of bacteria and yeast. So the optimal thing to do is to digest your food. Those bacteria and yeast, yes, they eat the fiber in your food, and they get along quite nicely. But if you do not digest the starches and the lactose and the sucrose, which people with these disorders can't digest, you are overfeeding them. And they are growing by leaps and bounds. They begin crawling up the small intestine. That's where you get your Crohn's disease. It usually hits that one area of the small intestine adjacent to the colon where the bacteria are growing. And bacteria do not belong in the small intestine, but by golly, they're getting up there. But anyhow, after the 12 years, by this time I'm almost 60 years old, and I had been invited to do a PhD at medical school, and I realized that if I spent another 10 years there, the information was not getting to the people. And I was still at heart, my first priority was getting information to people such as Herb and I had been, who were struggling for information. For 3 years, we were almost destroyed because we could not get any information. We kept saying, surely what she eats has something to do with it. Food has nothing to do with it. Food has nothing to do with it. And people are still being told that food has nothing to do with digestive problems. That is ludicrous. So I wanted to get this information out to the parents and the spouses and the people who were taking care of loved ones and didn't know what to feed them. They're told, feed them what agrees with them. Well, you can't figure that out because you can eat something in the morning that can affect you at night or the next day. So I realized after the 12 years that I better get out there in the real world again. And I began teaching at the community college. And my students began calling me and asking me to do private consulting. And in 6 years, I did 400 cases of Crohn's disease, colitis, diverticulitis, celiac disease. They were not doing well on the gluten-free diet, spastic colon, irritable bowel syndrome. And I found out that the diet was working almost 95% for small intestinal Crohn's. Within 4 weeks, these people were being turned around. It was working about 75% for the colitis condition, which my daughter had. That one is the most difficult to turn around. A lot of flare-ups during the first year until you can get straightened out. And sometimes in the first month, they find the diet is having no impact. And I tell them in the book, it is probably not going to work for you. But in 75% of the cases, they will improve considerably or get better. Diverticulitis is the easiest one to turn around of all.
Well, that's interesting.
Very interesting. Yes, very interesting. Yes. And at any rate, at that point in time, I realized that I had the theoretical training that I had in the 12 years, that I had the practical experience from the 6 years of consulting, and we wrote the first book called Food and the Gut Reaction. And guess what? It became a bestseller in Canada. You know, we couldn't get anyone to publish it because the publishers kept saying to us, there aren't enough people out there who would be interested in a book on gastrointestinal disease. I've got news for you, publishers.
Right.
I've got news for you. There are at least 10 million in North America alone. And in fact, the book, you don't have to go on the diet when you buy the book, but you learn a lot about the digestive tract. But at any rate, we were on a show, a TV show similar to yours. It's on every day it comes out of Toronto. And I was on for 10 minutes after the book had been out 2 years, and in 10 days, we shipped out 23,000 books, which is only saying one thing, that the people out there are salivating for this information. They cannot get it anywhere, and the library is breaking at the seams with it. So what I've done, what I did in my first book, and what I expanded in the second book, Breaking the Vicious Cycle, was to get the research data and put it together in my hypothesis. The diet is Dr. Haas's, but I went, and in light of all the research, there is so much research being done. In light of all the research which has been currently done, I've put it together in what we call a hypothesis. This is to explain why it's working. It may not be accurate. Maybe somebody will come up with another hypothesis 2 months from now. Fine, be my guest. But this was the best I could do. So, and then that's the first part of the book. And the second part of the book is the recipes. So as someone once said to me, don't worry if I don't understand every word, Elaine, although there are pictures in there to help them understand it. And I think most people do. Don't worry, I'll go in the kitchen and cook. So we have some very easy recipes in there. For example, the children just love the banana pancakes for breakfast. We can't give them cereal because they're made with grains, you know. So we have a lot of recipes to substitute. We have banana pancakes. All you do is beat up an egg, mash a banana in it, and you fry them out, and the kids love them. A big omelet.
I wish we could share one of those with you right now.
Very inexpensive. Make them in 3 minutes, less than that. We have some gourmet recipes people have sent me that are really good. They take a little longer. Some people love to be gourmet cooks, and they wouldn't mind them. We have a recipe in there for lunch that costs 15 cents to make. And my husband and I have them every day for lunch. They're called Herb's Bean Pancakes. My husband invented them. All they are is a cup of pureed legumes, white beans, with an egg, a little onion, and baking soda. We fry them into 4 nice big brown pancakes, and they have starch in them. You see, the diet has everything. It eliminates certain starches which have been found to be bothersome and to be not good for these people.
Okay, now, we want to differentiate here that we're talking about a different type of diet than the rotation diet, because this is what a lot of people are turning to is a rotation diet. Don't eat anything more than so much or it'll build up and you become allergic to it then. But as Elaine begins to unfold what this is really all about, she's touched on it a little bit, but to get into understanding it better, maybe we could take your chart on the digestion and you could explain that just a little bit for the people.
Okay, and I would also like to make a comment, if you don't mind, that there is a similarity between, there is a common denominator between the rotation diet. It helps a lot of people. The reason is we're both of us are working with the immune system. Right. The rotation diet is used because of food sensitivities, and the principle being that if you skip a few days between eating certain things, they're not going to aggravate your immune system. But in fact, the latest research is showing that the reason the immune system is developing all these allergies is because of the overgrowth of bacteria and yeast in the intestinal tract. I mean, they do have a similarity, and they're not contradicting each other.
But they're
both dealing with the immune system. That's why I said you have to know your immunology when you're working in this area. So, in fact, if people are happy with the rotary diet, be my guest if it's helping them. The idea is, though, that what we're trying to do with this diet is to decrease the overgrowth of yeast and bacteria in the colon, because that is the incubating tank. That is where normally yeast and bacteria will grow, down there in the colon. And when when people develop these disorders and they continue eating the so-called normal diet, it is impossible for this sick intestinal tract to digest the starches and the lactose and the sucrose. And the reason it's impossible, because it has been shown in 25, 35 years of research that they lose the ability to digest these things because of things that are even happening in the upper part of the small intestine. So what we have to do is eliminate those sucrose and lactose and some of those starches so that they won't go down to the colon and overfeed the bacteria, because all these guys down here, these bacteria and yeast, want to do is make babies. They want to multiply, they want to proliferate, and that's all they're interested in. And when they overgrow, that's where the problems come in, because they produce gases, they produce toxins, which will poison the entire system. That's why the neurological problems manifest themselves, why the skin problems manifest themselves. So what we've intervened, and we're using carbohydrates such that we know are easy to assimilate. And so they're getting a well-balanced, nutritious, varied diet. But it takes a great deal of scientific know-how in nutritional biochemistry to know which ones to eliminate. And Dr. Haas developed that diet, and I have since found the rationale for it. So this is what is happening. We're trying to keep undigested food, especially starches and sugars, from getting down into that colon, because all it does, you know what a rumen of a cow is. An incubation tank starts down there, a fermentation tank. We don't want that to happen. We want those healthy bacteria to be there. We want to maintain them, and they can nicely do that with the fiber in their food. None of us can digest fiber. When we eat whole foods, we have fiber in the vegetables, in the fruits, and the whole grains. And they will support the growth of these bacteria and yeast. But we don't want all this undigested sugar and starch to get down there and overfeed them, because what they do is start migrating up the small intestine, right here in the ileum, where Crohn's usually starts. That's where they first migrate. They cause inflammation, and they cause all the symptoms that you get with Crohn's disease. Terrible pain from the gas building up there. Terrible pain from inflammation, obstruction of the small intestine, so food can't go down, and they're rushed to emergency, throwing up and with terrible pain. So what we're trying to do is get these fellows down to their normal size by giving a full, varied, well-balanced diet, but still knowing what we're doing.
Well, so then the people who are aware of and have been working with the rotation diet then, rather than feel like now we've got to switch over to a whole different type of thing, just look at it like you're already on the right track and be doing good things, but now we're just going to go a step further with it.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, I am getting an increasing number of letters from the clinical ecologists. There's a doctor in Oregon that's been writing me, has his nurse writing me. Some of his patients haven't done too well on the rotary diet. They have them on this diet, and they're doing beautifully. So there's more communication going on. I have to give the people who developed the rotary diet a tremendous amount of credit. They were the first group of doctors who realized the importance of food. And they got us all started on thinking about food and all these other problems, so they deserve a big pat on the back. But at any rate, this is just a little extension of what they're doing. And so there's no contradiction here. At any rate, this is what it's all about. Again, to repeat, you can eat the best diet in the world. You can pop all the pills you want. But if you are not digesting, you will not assimilate. And you will not, therefore, nourish the spleen, the brain, the liver, all the other organs. They are dependent on this gastrointestinal tract, this intestine, to process your food and absorb it for you. So you can take all the vitamins in the world, they're probably helping, but you've got to think of digestion. That's also one of the pillars of nutritional biochemistry.
And another aspect of that, too, is the emotional thing that goes along with it. And as I hear you telling your story about your daughter, through all of that, I'm sure you were giving her some emotional support, because sometimes with children, we are hearing so much about ADD and those type of things. And these children are being labeled as hyperactive, and they don't know how to discipline, they don't know how to deal with them. And let's put them on Ritalin. And it breaks my heart, because it takes away their ability to be the person that they're meant to be. And that is something that's very close to my heart, to see the things that we can do to help change the attitude of the parents. This is a
very serious thing that's happening. You know, I'm older than you are, Wilma, and I lived. I mean, things are cyclic. It wasn't how many years ago? 20 years ago, that Dr. Feingold treated hyperkinetic behavior, and he was into the additives. Interestingly enough, when he took them off the additives, they were also off the junk, because you have to give. You see. But he was projecting in on additives alone. But I said to myself, well, if they're off the additives, they're eating real food now. So why did they get better? Was it the fact that the additives were removed, or because they were eating quality whole food? Yeah. But we're not going to argue that. You know, there is a chapter in my book called The Brain Connection.
Yes.
And I often laugh about it. If I die tomorrow, I will die in peace, because that chapter talks about hyperkinetic behavior. It talks about epilepsy being reversed. It talks about not all, but those people who have some bowel problems, along with the epilepsy and the schizophrenia. If people who have children with ADD put them on this diet for 10 days, I will bet you that 85–95% of them are turned around in 10 days without Ritalin.
Now, let's just stop and really think about that. You probably either have a child or know someone who does have a child that is in this situation. And when the determination has been here to do what has been done to help us to understand this, I think this is really exciting, because these are little lives that we're talking about that can make them have happiness, for the rest of their life, or they can live in agony for the rest of their life. I know I lived in agony for quite a long period of time before I became aware of the food I was eating was poisoning my system. So this is something that is very special, and the more we can help other people to understand this, then each one of us needs to share it with other people, and we can really make an impact on the whole world by helping other people to understand these things. And so in really understanding now how this can help people, I'd like to talk to Linda for a little bit and just understand where she came from and how long she was ill, and let her explain a little bit about her condition to us.
Thank you. Well, first I'd like to say that I can't express to you enough how honored I am to be sitting next to Elaine Gottschall. I'm not kidding. Her book and her diet has literally changed my life. It has changed the life of my husband, my children, and it has made me a healthy person. I've had Crohn's disease for 11 years. I was diagnosed with it about 8 years ago. They tried to figure it out for a long time. Finally, they did when I went in with hemorrhaging, rectal hemorrhaging. I had to have several blood transfusions, and now, finally, after doing several completely humiliating tests, they figured out Crohn's disease. Unfortunately, I was also told that this was something I would just have to live with, eat whatever you usually do, and just get used to counting bathrooms at the mall and at every public area that you go into, because you will have to just deal with it. Several years later, I perforated. I had bowel perforation. I was very ill, no energy. I was eating, of course, the things that you think of eating without the education are cereal with milk, mashed potatoes, all those things. Now that I'm educated, I understand that was exactly the wrong thing. But at that time, I was putting that only into my system, and I ended up having a perforation, which is like an appendix breaking. My bowel simply pretty much exploded, and all those toxins leaked out into my body. I went into surgery not knowing whether or not I would be alive, whether or not I would live through it. Thank God I did. I have a wonderful family and prayer, and but now I wanted to know more. I can't continue to live like this, not knowing when I'm going to end up in the hospital next, or not knowing how to help myself. When moving to Fort Wayne, I became part of the Crohn's support group here in Fort Wayne, and thank God that was where I was introduced to Mrs. Gottschall's diet. Her theory and her research has enabled me to have something to get my hands on and to study and to put into practice.
So this is where now she has something to focus on, a goal, something to really work with. And when you think of how in what she's saying, the same thing, you know, with me is, and with you also, this doesn't just affect you, it affects your whole family, and how they can deal with the whole thing. So as you're listening out there, if you have these conditions or know someone who does, we hope that you'll look into this so that you can have a happier, healthier life.